For some strange reason, four folks said that they ceded their time to me. Now, I'm not sure why they made that mistake, but they did. So if I go over a little bit, I can give you the names. But in any case, my name is Jim Caldwell, and I'm as old as Grayson. And at least the piece of paper I think I gave you here is probably the same piece of paper that we've had for a while, and that when Steve was talking about, well, we've heard from so-and-so about this and that and so forth, I sort of recognize a lot of those things in that piece of paper. So let me just start by saying I do believe that the first slide that he shows that talks about we need to do something at Grayson is right on. Let's face it, it does need to be retired in an orderly way. It needs to be replaced. There needs to be significant investment in new facilities or new programs in order to replace that thing. And there's no doubt about that. There's also should be no doubt about reliability. We're not here to talk about having an unreliable system. The easiest way we're going to lose confidence in green energy or in the future is if that turns into an unreliable solution. So that, to me, is off the table, and what we need to do is to think about what is the cost-effective thing, and it starts with cost. It doesn't start with reliability. And the Grayson repowering project at $500 million for 250 megawatts is very expensive. It's very expensive compared to any other repowering facility I've seen. The closest analog to that is the Puente Power Plant in Oxnard that we talked about. That is in a load pocket. That was a plant that was designed to meet an N-1 and N-1 contingency, and it's roughly half the cost of Grayson. It was determined to be too expensive, and that the alternative of preferred resources like energy efficiency and rooftop solar and batteries was a preferred option. So it starts with that cost, and keep that number in mind, $2,000 a kilowatt. And if we're willing to spend that much money for a new gas plant, we ought to be willing to spend something similar to that, or maybe a little bit less than that, for the alternatives. And just as an example, we talked a little bit, or there's been a little bit of talk about energy efficiency, and I looked it up in the same report that they used in the EIR as to what cost we have done for the energy efficiency. And we got about 10 megawatts of energy efficiency from residential air conditioning, and we spent $14 a kilowatt for that energy efficiency, and that's compared to 2,000. So we need to think about those comparisons, and we need to do that. The second thing that I think we need to talk about is the emissions. And clearly we need to reduce the emissions, clearly we need to reduce the toxics, clearly we need to reduce the cancer risk. Where that mostly comes from is from burning the Shoal Canyon methane without controls. So without cleaning up the gas and without controls on the boiler, we're burning that methane at Grayson. We have to stop doing that, and we have to stop doing that soon. We cannot get rid of that gas. It is there. It comes from the garbage that we laid down 10, 15 years ago. It will be there long after we're here. So we have got to face that decision, and that decision is one that is a gating item for going in the future. There are options that we can do at Shoal Canyon, but we need to get on with that. There can be no delay in worrying about that. The second, or the next thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is this question of reserves. And as I've read through the material, the amount of reserves that were required has gone from 80 to 100 to now, it's now up to 171 megawatts of reserves in order to meet these requirements. First of all, that is not a legal requirement. The legal requirement from NERC and WEC is enforced at the balancing authority level. IID, which got fined, is a balancing authority. LADWP is a balancing authority. The PDCI is not on LADWP's N-1. It is not N-1. The LADWP's N-1 is loss of one of the coal units in Intermountain. LADWP's N-1 is the loss of the second unit at Intermountain.
Okay.
So that,
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell.
thank you.
Next speaker will be Sean Starkey.
There's some people that were willing to cede their time.
Who would those people be?
A list of people that are willing to cede their time.
President Lal, with regards to ceding time to other speakers, the GW Commission policy is that for a presentation, other speakers are not allowed to cede their time to the speaker who has a presentation. However, for public comment purposes, it's up to the discretion of the commission
Okay,
president.
so I will accept one speaker. Who would that speaker be? So I will
Well,
give you an
the
additional-
four names I was given her that I talked to was Andrew Allison, Dorothy Molina, John Morris, and Byron Chan.
Okay, let me see if I have cards for them. I'm assuming it would have to be someone whose card I have.
That is correct.
Okay, so the next card that I have is Dorothea Molina. So if she's willing to cede her time, I will give you an additional 5 minutes.
Thank you. I apologize for.
No, that's fine, thank you.
So the question of reserves, the legal requirement for reserves is that, and that is by the BASA, by the Balancing Area Authority Services Agreement with LADWP, is that Glendale supply its fair share of LADWP's obligation. And that is given in the BASA as 80 megawatts, 40 of which must be spinning reserve. So anything in addition to the 80 megawatts is not a legal requirement of NERC and FERC regulations. It is not a requirement of the contract with LADWP. It is a economic decision of the city of Glendale to carry that extra reserves, and those extra reserves are costly. We've already said that they're $2,000 a kilowatt. So that doesn't mean, so I think that part of this study that we talk about has to be on what is the appropriate level of reserves to be carried by Glendale. Glendale is, or it appears to be, a load pocket. That load pocket is, again, a place where these things can happen if things go wrong. There has been no requirement that I've seen that says that anything above 80 megawatts is, again, going to cause a reliability issue. There clearly are economic consequences to not being able to balance the authority under the BASA, and those economic consequences need to be weighed. And so that number of the reserves is an important number. The next thing that we talk about is the integration of the renewables, and the idea that all renewables must be firmed and shaped, or all intermittent renewables must be firmed and shaped. That is, simply speaking, not true. It is true that as we increase the percentage of variable renewable resources, that the system that is left must be flexible enough to be able to deal with the loads and to balance the system in real time. Glendale's power content has 20% wind and 0 solar. Okay, a renewable portfolio that contains roughly equal quantities of solar and wind, the solar and wind tend to firm and shape each other, because the minimum output of wind is, generally speaking, at noon. The maximum output of solar is at noon. So the combination of the two requires less than either one, in less flexibility out of the rest of the system than either one. So it is not true that we need to firm and shape all renewables. It is not true that we can actually do better by doing all the firming and shaping inside the system. Clearly, we need flexibility at Glendale, and we need to make sure that that happens. One of the easiest things to do is, first of all, to balance the renewable portfolio. The second thing we need to be able to do is to be able to trade with the other balancing authorities in the area. One thing that did bother me about the EIR was the comment about how the energy imbalance market that is springing up throughout the West and that LADWP is joining next year, that somehow prevents Glendale from trading or from, it's exactly the opposite. The energy imbalance market is an opportunity for Glendale to participate with the rest of the West, and if it has a surplus of energy at some hour, it can trade that surplus with somebody in Idaho, somebody in Arizona, somebody in the Pacific Northwest. That is the function of the EIM. You do not have to join the California Independent System Operator in order to join the EIM. LADWP has absolutely no intention of joining the California Independent System Operator, but it is joining the EIM, and Glendale should too. They should piggyback on what LADWP does. So have a balanced portfolio, join the energy imbalance market, and a lot of that issue of integration of renewables will go away. As far as the batteries, I think it's a good thing that Steve has talked about, saying that he is willing to accept the fact that battery costs have come down. The battery costs indeed have come down significantly below the numbers that he talked about. With that, I'll just at that point.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.